masses. Man, you now tuned in to purpose and practice. Ayy, yeah, purpose and practice. Keep your mental sharp, learn all the tactics. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to purpose and practice. Ayy, yeah, purpose and practice. Podcast game, ayy, he got it mastered. It's encore. It's a non-core banger. Dr. Ross.
Peace to the podcast community. We are back at Purpose and Practice podcast with your host, Dr. Rawls Dill. I can't believe we're at episode number 11. It's been 1 month, a little over a month, and we have, taken it to the 11th episode. Shout out to all of the guests, all of the folks who've come through, showing, improving, giving us purpose, giving us practice, giving us stories. Here at Purpose and Practice, we believe in the Sankofa. We believe Sankofa is a verb. We want to reach back and we want to bring forward. So that's what we're all about in Purpose and Practice. So when you join our community, when you listen to the podcast, you are engaging in brilliance and intelligence from all walks of life. And today we have a very, very special guest. I won't even call her guest. I'll call her family. I'll call her my sister. We have over 15 years together of knowing each other. Professionally, we've worked. And like I said, friends, sister, it's fam. So, Joy Daniels is a heavy hitter. You're going to hear from her in this hour. But during this time, educationally, in the crisis that we're in terms of education, and the transformation of education, we have to look toward those, brilliant educators out there who are doing the work, who are making it happen in the classrooms, now making it happen virtually. It's important that we pay respect and we salute those folks, because right now it's a little sketchy right now out there for educators. Educators are, for some reason, becoming targets. Educators, for some reason, are becoming the focus in terms of negative energy. And what I wanted to do here at the podcast is show and prove that there are some brilliant folks out there who are really trying to make it happen no matter what the circumstances. So this is our educational series. We have another chapter in our Purpose and Practice educational series. So Joy, let me shut up and find out, how are you doing? How you feeling?
Good. First, I just want to say I love the whole intro. I was like,
oh
I love that.
Shout out to Mr. Encore. That's Mr. Encore. Jerome Hill put that together. He was my first guest. Yeah, he was my first guest. And matter of fact, if you've never listened to his music, you need to check it. Mr. Encore, he's got 2 albums on Spotify. You can pull it up on Tidal. You can pull it up on Apple Music, I believe it's on. But definitely, check him out, Mr. Encore, because, he comes with the beats and the lyrics. So definitely a shout out to him. So how you feeling?
Good. I'm excited. I feel like, it's nice. I feel like we're virtually having a conversation. So, this is good. I love the whole purpose and practice idea. And, it's just some really intelligent people out there. So I just, this is great. Nice platform. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you. Because the community is what makes it happen. It was an idea, but the guests who come on, you are the ones who make it happen. So thank you, for coming onto the show for a special episode number 11. So Joy, why don't you, just kind of tell us a little bit about what you do professionally. We like to, spend the first part of our hour just getting to know our guests. So if you can just kind of share your background in terms of what you're doing now.
Okay. So right now, I'm blessed. I'm going into my second year. I'm the director of early childhood in the Long Branch Public School Systems. Before that, I was 5 years being an administrator. I also had the role of being a master teacher for preschool and for kindergarten. And then before that, I was just a phenomenal, excited, relentless teacher. So I taught kindergarten, preschool, and then 1 year in third grade. So, but my heart and soul really lies in early childhood. So having this position just allows me to just really spread my wings and then share my joy for early childhood.
Yes, definitely an exciting teacher. Joy's one of those teachers that, and I had the pleasure of working closely with Joy for a year. And, we were colleagues, in like, to be able to see her in action, and the impact that she had with children, but not only children, but staff as well. Joy is definitely an uplifter. She's the kind of teacher that, if you got young children, like, in that early elementary level, pre-K through grade 3, that's who you want on the carpet with your children. Joy is who you want on the carpet, because she just brings an excitement and a passion, for what she does as an educator. So definitely a salute to you, Joy. So, no doubt. What we like to do is we like to kind of go back and find out, because I always believe that a lot of times we look for product, we look for the end result, we look for outcomes, but sometimes we forget about the process. We forget about, the beginnings. We forget about the journeys. And a lot of what we do here at Purposes in Practice is we really like to hear about those journeys, and how the Joy who is here with us today, how you have kind of progressed to this moment. So if you don't mind, just kind of going back and giving us, some early years, some things that, that we should know about you growing up.
Okay. So, wow, let me see how far back. Well, before I moved to Jersey, I'm originally from Queens, New York. Shout out, Queens, New York.
Shout out.
Before I originally moved up here, but just to kind of go over my educational journey. So I didn't go into education at first. I went into college and I thought I was going to become a doctor, because in the African culture, there's not too many occupations that they really advocate. You either become a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, or an engineer. So I was like, okay, I'll just become a doctor. Yeah. And so I was born in Ghana, in Accra, Ghana. So yes, there's a very heavy, culture of education and, making it and, being successful. So, but in their minds, they just think that you only have those 4 occupations. So I went and became a doctor, and I realized I couldn't pass organic too. So I'm like, okay, this is not going to work. Then I thought I wanted to become a forensic scientist, because it was just way too many detectives. I think watching CSI Snapped, I'm like, oh, okay, I can figure out these cases. And I actually applied to John Jay, got accepted. And I was like, maybe I'll do that. And then I'm thinking, okay, let me get serious. And I just really started to think, what is it that you really love when you were little? So of course I was a latchkey kid. So I was home a lot with my 9 teddy bears, and I used to play school a lot. So I used to imitate my teachers. So I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll just go into teaching and see how that goes. So, when I finally buckled down and said, okay, I'm going to go into teaching, I really decided to go into early childhood, because I wanted something more specialized, because I felt like with elementary is so broad. And I felt like with early childhood, it allowed me to at least be around children that weren't tainted yet. When you work with early childhood children, it's the one place where you can be yourself.
Yes.
They're not judging you. They're not tainted. The world hasn't got to them yet. So I'm like, okay, I need to be with that type of audience.
Yes.
But one of my experiences that really brought me to the teacher that I was, and still the educator that I am. So I was in Catholic school.
Okay.
And I was in 5th grade, and my teacher's name was Miss Kiermeyer, and she told us, I want you all to memorize your prepositions. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, I can memorize my prepositions, like about, above, across, after, against, along, among, right. So what I did was I said, okay, I need something that's going to help make this information stick. So what I did was I connected the prepositions to Yankee Doodle. So I'm like, okay, so, Yankee Doodle went to town, right? So I was like, okay. So when I got up, it was my turn. She said, okay, Joy, Darbo, please get up. So I went up there and I said, about, above, across, beyond, behind, beneath, beside, down, don't. So I'm singing and I'm thinking like, oh, I got this. And then after I was done, she said, Joy Darbo. She said, I asked you to recite your prepositions. And of course, the kids were snickering and my heart was torn. I'm thinking, I just finished singing all the prepositions with a tune.
But yeah,
So it brings me back to my teaching days when I'm thinking, when I become that teacher, I will never, ever embarrass a kid like that because of how they presented their information. This is the way the information stuck for me. Maybe it might be different for the kids, but
yes.
I just said I would never do that. So I felt like it impacted me as a teacher, where I was like all types of modalities, like, visual, music. I really love music. I mean, anything that has a beat or music to it, it totally draws me in. So I have to say that was a very pivotal time in my childhood that affected me and made me the best teacher that I was. That I said, I promise I won't embarrass a child like that just because of how they were thinking or how they processed something.
Wow.
So
that's well, first of all, shout out to the fifth grade Joy putting that together. Like, I struggle with my prepositions. So, I definitely wasn't putting it in a song. So it's, but when we talk about educators, sometimes, unfortunately, there are situations where dreams are buried and dreams are killed, and it's very telling, because the more folks that I talk about, they tell these stories about these small interactions, or we can call them microaggressions, but there's small things that happen in classrooms. And it's like this power struggle. And sometimes, teachers, especially in the earlier years, teachers doing little small things that sometimes teachers aren't even aware of. They're not even aware, of the dreams that they're crushing. But one thing that it seems like you did, it seems like that didn't define you. It defined you, but in a different way, in a positive way.
Right.
So
right.
How like, talk to me, like, how does a fifth grader, right? You got to tell us more about who you were as a fifth grader to be able to conquer that at that point, and kind of conceptualize it and say, all right, I'm gonna make good of this.
Well, as a fifth grader, I felt like I was, I always got in trouble for talking. Go figure. So talked a lot, very outgoing. I found that I thought I was pretty eclectic. I wasn't like everybody else. Even the fact that I just created that song, it was just like, okay, no one was home to help me. So I'm thinking it's either, I got to survive, and I don't want to be embarrassed, even though I was embarrassed.
Yes.
But, I just feel like, I don't know. I just feel like everybody has that piece of like, okay, how do I survive this? How do I conquer this? So I just think then that was my only way of conquering it, to feel as though I was successful. But like you said, that to me, it was a little trauma. And I was like, you know what? I just won't do that to another child,
like it because, even, let's not fool ourselves. Let's not kid ourselves. Even as we progress, we go off to high school, we go off to college, we go into the workforce. We still brush up against, some folks who don't believe in our talent, who try to stump our creativity. So, even like doing something like this, there's like, I believe that there's genius in everyone, and I believe that there's that spark in everyone. But sometimes, we allow, we're complicit in allowing others to, like, shun us, or, to put us down, or to put us in our so-called place. So, I've really feel, as a fifth grader, to be able to take that and not let it define you. I think that that's a key lesson. I think that's something that, children, we're not always able to do as children. So
right.
Definitely salute to that. So the whole teacher thing, because there's some folks out there who listen to this podcast. There's some young folks out there who listen to the podcast. And when you first started, you talked about, these professions that we sometimes call, elite professions, whether it's being a doctor, being an attorney. And when you went in a different route, was that a tough thing with your family? Like, because there was another expectation?
Absolutely. I remember telling my mom, I'm like, Mom, I'm becoming a teacher. She was like, what? They don't make any money. God bless her. She's not saying that now, but because of that strong mindset, like, okay, so, why are you doing that? They don't make a lot of money. But I felt when I actually stepped into the classroom, I said, okay, this is what freedom feels like. I wasn't worried about, okay, I'm not a doctor, but I'm like, look at all these kids that I get to make an impact, and they're all staring at me. And we're making this connection. I don't ever want to go back. So I feel like it's almost, how it's like when you stop worrying about what people think, it's that freedom. So I felt like that when I went into the classroom. It was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be singing loud with all these kids. I'm supposed to be teaching them their letters. And, I just felt the sense of freedom. It was like, okay, this is it. And I didn't want to go back.
Yeah, that feeling, listen, I miss that feeling being in front of children, and I believe once a teacher, always a teacher. When you're a teacher at heart, I believe you're always a teacher, but there's nothing more, and I'm saying intimidating because it's such a great responsibility to be in front of children and teaching children. And it can be a very humbling.
Right.
And when I say intimidating, I don't mean like you're scared, but you have a great responsibility. You have these lives in your hands. But then at the same time, it's like the adrenaline of being in front of a class, and I think, that's why I say shout out to teachers, because the amount of decisions that teachers make on the course of a day in a classroom, you're talking about thousands of quick split second decisions, that I don't think if you don't have an understanding of a classroom situation, you could never really, no matter how we went to school as children, you can never understand, the struggle of being in a classroom and dealing with those situations as they arise. What are some of the things in terms of being a classroom teacher? What are some of the things that, if you were giving advice to younger up and coming teachers, what type of advice would you give them in terms of being an effective classroom teacher?
I have to say, and I actually said this to someone not too long ago, if you're going to go into teaching, go into it with the right reasons, number one. Go into it knowing that you're going to fail forward sometimes. It's okay. Like, it's almost a good place to kind of fail forward and get right back up. Also, I always tell people, check your belief system. What do you believe about children? Because I sometimes do see that teachers almost have like this, I call it like the hope, factors, like, oh, I hope you do well. Oh, I hope you can get this. And I feel like if your attitude is you hope, then that's how you're going to teach. So you really got to check your belief system. You got to check your heart and say, you know what, how am I really feeling about how I am as a teacher? Do I feel equipped? Because sometimes when you don't feel equipped, then you don't bring your A game. True. But I always tell people, check your belief system. Like so funny, when I was at the Gregory School, I won't say her name, but I was next door to a gifted class. And then here I am, and I have, an inclusion class. I have kids in there with IEPs and, speech communication. And I said, you know what? Oh, we're the gifted kindergarten class. That's why we're right here. So I think I taught with that sense of like, I know you have a speech issue, but you know what? That's not going to be the roadblock up in here. That's not going to be the roadblock. So I really think that teachers have to check your intentions and what's your belief system, because that to me will drive how you say, you know what, Jacob didn't get it today. I'm going to do something else tomorrow. Like, I think that's why for me, I was very relentless. I was like, okay, all right, that didn't work. Okay, I got to try something else. And something I always try to encourage teachers, what's in your educational backpack? I always use that term. I feel like sometimes teachers stop learning. And then you go and look for other tricks. You're like, oh, dag, it's a little empty in there. Well, because you haven't filled it. You haven't taught yourself things. You haven't tried things. You got to fail forward. So I always say, check your educational backpack. Always be open to learning. Never think you know it all. And you have to be that person that if this doesn't work, you have to have something else, especially in early child when the kids are like all over the place. You have to be a really quick thinker. But I have to say the biggest things is, what are your belief systems, and fill your educational backpack. What's in there? What do you got for us? What do you have for these 20 kids that are looking at you? You better bring it. Like, it's better be on, like I always say, on and popping. Like, what you got for these kids? But my biggest thing is the belief system.
The belief system, I think, is critical. And when you go through teacher education programs, there's not a lot of time spent on developing philosophy, developing a perspective, like what are you teaching for, in purpose. Like there's not a lot of time spent there, so usually what happens is teachers graduate college, they go into a workforce, they go into a school district. They most often they're going to take on the culture of what in the climate of whatever is in that space that they enter.
Yes.
And then they begin to develop, this philosophy or their ideas, of teaching. But I like what you also said. I want to talk a little bit more. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but never stop learning. Right. And it's so funny because right now, with the situation with virtual learning and students missing classroom time last year, there's a term that's out there right now. Everyone's saying this unfinished learning. And I'm like, man, learning is never done. Like knowledge is infinite. So all learning is unfinished. So what are we talking about? This unfinished, like it's putting this negative or this deficit on it. Like if we know as educators that, that knowledge is infinite, that learning, we always say we're lifetime learners or, lifelong learners. So there's never a point of being unfinished. There's never a point of saying, oh, I didn't learn everything I needed to learn last year. So if you don't mind, tell us ways that you stay like abreast of up and coming, new, cutting edge. Like how do you stay sharp as a teacher?
So one thing I have to say, I always tell people, don't, I always say you have to walk the walk and talk the talk. So I'm that teacher, I'm that educator that's like, okay, don't sit up here and tell teachers what they should be doing if you weren't in the arena. Like, how you have those people, like what you're talking about, like they're talking about unfinished. Okay, those are people that are out of the arena. So I make sure that I stay in the arena. Like if a teacher is, some teachers get a little nervous and I'm like, hey, do you mind if I read that book? Because they're like, am I doing something wrong? So what I call it the itch. It's like, can I just read that book? Because I feel like I read something and I just want to see if it works. So here I am, even as an administrator, I'm thinking I'm not above the teachers. I'm still a learner just like they are. But I want them to know as you're learning, I'm learning with you, I'm learning to you, and I'm learning for you as well. So I want to try something out as well. So I feel like with some of these up and coming teachers, do not forget your roots. Like for me, I'll read a book in a minute. I mean, like even on my website, something I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show teachers, like, I can't expect you to unpack the standards if I'm not in the arena with you. So what am I going to do? I'll put a video out of myself. I will fail forward first and say, look, I'm trying. And then now let's watch me. So, even if you have to critique me, I'll take the feedback. I try to do it really perfect so I don't have to get the feedback. but there's something about saying as an administrator, I'm not too good to learn that task or that skill. You're not above these teachers when it comes to learning. You have to be learning. You have to get in the arena with them.
Yes.
So
that is, and that goes back to that unfinished learning, because sometimes in educational leadership, we get to a point and we think we've arrived. Like we're like, listen, I'm at the top. Like, so, I don't do that anymore. I don't do. And I always thought, because I believe everyone who walks into the school building is an educator, right? So my custodian is going to be an educator. Those responsible for serving our babies food, they're educators. The bus aides are educators. The bus drivers are educators. And like you said, I think in a lot with educational leaders, we have to check our egos, and understand that we are colleagues, and and we're only going to be as strong as our weakest link. So if I think I'm all the way up here, and but then somebody next to me is failing, then we all fail, and we're all failing.
Right.
So I
and
definitely
you know what I do
that.
too as an administrator? I actually would go and visit. I'm like, okay, how sometimes people are like, oh, go check this teacher out or go check this teacher. I'm like, oh, all right, let me go check her. So sometimes I will go and see those very exemplar teachers, because I'm thinking, okay, so if she's an exemplar, what makes her an exemplar? Because I want to learn from her. Even when I went into elementary as a administrator, I was like, okay, I really 4th and 5th grade, it wasn't in my normal area. So I'm like, you know what? I'm a learner, so I'm going to go see the best fourth and fifth grade teacher and learn from them and use them as the exemplar. So now when I go see other teachers, I'm like, okay, so this is what it really should look like. So now I can hopefully give her feedback. So, and I'm always asking questions. So what made you do that? You know, I want teachers to know, okay, so she is asking me questions because she wants to learn. I'm like, yeah, I want to learn from you because I don't know what I'm coming from. I'm more early child, like, you know, pre-K to second grade. So teach me, show me, you know, and I think that whole ego piece, I feel like teachers respect you more when they feel like, okay, she really is about that life. Like she really is about the game piece of teaching. And I think that's what really sets you apart.
Yes, I definitely agree. And it'll take you far in building the relationships that you need to get like the most out of the organization that you're leading. And to get the most, because that's when people are like, listen, you know, I'm not letting that person down. I'm not letting this leader down. You know, if you know, Miss Daniels is out here, you know, doing this and making it happen on the carpet, man, I better get my butt on the carpet, you know, and that's the kind of energy that we need, you know, to be transformative education, you know, educators. So, you know, here's one of the things, and I've always gone to you for this, you know, I've always gone to you for leadership in terms of, not even leadership, I'm not even going to call that. I'm going to call it your brilliance in terms of literacy, right? I feel like I've always tried to pick your brain to find out as much as I could about literacy. Right now, we are in a situation where a lot of our young readers or our babies are missing quality time in classrooms in learning to read. And I know that there are parents out there. You know, because I'm one of them who worries about their child falling behind, their child not grasping reading, not grasping math. But I'm going to stick to reading because to me, you talked about freedom earlier. I really equate literacy with freedom. Yes, I think being able to read and being able to write, I equate it to freedom. So what I want to spend some time, you know, doing and hearing more from you is about like getting to, you know, reading, the science of reading, but giving our parents, our educators out there, some tips that they could use in order to make sure that they're making it happen at home, you know, with this virtual sense. So if you could just first start off by just, you know, going into the importance of literacy and early literacy, especially.
Okay. So I wish people can see my table. It is filled. So I think the best thing to do, kind of like what you said kind of tap into that whole science of reading. And I feel like it's even good for even just parents. Now I'm going to use some terminology, some literacy terminology, but you know what? I'm going to scaffold the language. And also for our up and coming, you know, educators, you need to know the language. So parents, you get to know language, but our educators, you really need to know the language. So I think what I want to do is, if you don't mind, I kind of want to start off with like a little bit of, you know, science and reading, and then I'm bringing it like full forward. Like it's like my table is set up like a lesson. Okay.
It's your world. Teach. Teach.
Okay. So I don't know if you can see this, but I'm going to bring it up close. You can see it?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. So with reading, when we talk about reading, there are two areas that really create skilled readers. And there's his rope. It's called Scarborough's rope, which is a really great visual. And I'm going to open up this. I have all my visuals. Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Can you see it?
So we got word recognition and language comprehension.
Yep. Equals
reading comprehension.
Reading comprehension. So my word recognition is like my phonics, phonemic awareness, words. And that's where a lot of our early childhood teachers usually kind of stay there a little bit. And then we have our language comprehension, which is basically deriving from meaning and spoken language. And then we want to make sure that we're strengthening that so that now children have a strong sense of reading comprehension. Okay. So I just want to just give a little bit of, and then I'm going to bring it full forward. So watch this. Okay. Now, watch this. So we know those two areas equal reading comprehension. But I do want to say this. So with your word recognition, they call those the constrained skills. Those are skills that I could have I don't want to say, I can control like the alphabets, the letters. I can control that. There's a scope and sequence. Where with language comprehension, it's called unconstrained skills, because now it's like is a deeper type of thinking. It's not something that's going to come obvious to the children. And I feel like sometimes our early teachers, love them dearly, they tend to focus on alphabets and letters, like, oh, you got to know your letters, you got to know your sounds. But I also have to be a thinker too, because pretty soon I'm going to have to transfer all those letters and words and know what they mean. So I got to transfer somehow. So I got to make sure we bring it together. So now I'm going to kind of go through the 4-part process of reading. Okay. So over here, it's so weird. It's like the mirror over here.
Yep.
Oh, there we go. Over here, you have something called phonological or phonology. That is basically children have to know I have a picture here, their letters and letter sounds. It's a picture, it's a bunch of pictures. Okay. So that's like your rhyming, your syllables, your word segment. If I say cat, you say rat. If I say cat and you say rat, well, what do you hear at the end pattern of rat and cat? Oh, I hear at. Like right now, you and I, we're talking in speech language. We're talking whole words.
Yes.
But we want our kids to know that these words are made up of sounds, which are called phonemes. Okay.
Yes.
So, and I just want to
hold on.
Okay.
You listen.
I'm sorry. I'm like,
people need to be paying for this, PD. But what I want to just bring to the forefront is that this is why reading to our children is important, and singing, because it made me think about those rhymes. Go ahead.
Yeah, singing. I'm telling you. Even if you make up, a rhyme like fee, fi, fo, fum, I want to, and you want some. Oh, you know what? Let's change that to some. So see, sigh, so some, I want more, you want some.
Yes.
And language is all about playing with all the speech sounds. And even in our early learners, that's what they really need. Play, sing. Singing is great. Like, don't get me started, because I will crack a tune. Okay, so after we go here, then we go over to orthographic. And orthographic is basically how we start to, hopefully I have my window here, watch this. How I start to connect the sounds to letters. So now my brain is like, okay, so I have these sounds, but now what does it look like for my brain to remember it? So these two work very closely. And that's why they call it letter sound correspondence. Wow. So now I'm going to move up. So now I got my sounds, and now I'm going to move up to my meaning, which is my morphemes. And that's basically the word. So let's say if we did the word cat, like we did over here. And then I'm going to go to my meaning. So now that I know what cat means, now I need to know, well, is it cat or is it cats? Morphemes is your smallest unit of meaning. If I put an S at the end of cats, now it becomes more than one. So that's plural. So we want children to know, so especially for when we start to deal with syntax, that we say the right word correctly. So now I went from my speech sounds. Now I know what it looks like in print. So now I went from speech to print, and now I went to meaning. The next step is the context. This is where a lot of teachers are kind of like, oh, okay, you know the word cat. Well, now I need to know, what does it look like in a sentence? And this is where I'm going to lift this up. And I have my sentence. The cat is brown. Nice. So now I need to know, how do I structure that? What's my syntax for that word? And then I connect it to a book. Because really, at the end, we want children to know that we're not just learning letters and letter sounds because it's cute. It's gotta go somewhere. Where am I going with this journey? And this is the why for children. This is the why. So we just can't stop here. Letters and letter sounds, that's cute. We got to go to meaning, and we have to bring it to context.
Wow. So you know what else? If you can just put that back up, though, Joy, because I think you made that point. Sometimes we stop at the beginning with phonological awareness, but you know what else? Sometimes we introduce the context first without really thoroughly going through those other stages. So
that's right. And people don't realize you can't have meaning without phonology. Yeah. I need to know how the word works before I start to apply meaning. But sometimes we try to apply meaning before I really know how the word works. So the left side of my brain hasn't really got a chance to understand, well, what does this word even look like first? I got to know what it looks like, what it sounds like. And then I start to bring meaning and then bring the syntax to it.
Love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Okay, so watch this. It. So wait, so I wanted to show, I'm so excited. So I want to show you something.
Go.
So one of the things I noticed is that syllables, a lot of our, teachers, they think syllables is just clapping out the words, which it is. So in early childhood, we start to think that syllables is really about word length. So let's say if it's elephant, so it's elephant.
You
A
clap it
child
out.
needs to
Yes.
know, okay, when I clap, if I had to clap that out 3 times, that means that that word is really long. So when I try to write that word out, I know that I'm not going to just write EL and T. There's more substance and more parts to that word.
Okay.
So I'm talking to my 3rd graders. So this is something that I noticed in our 3rd graders. Sometimes they need to also understand, they need to have more confidence dealing with multisyllabic words. That means big words. That means seeing words in parts. So if I say, hey, Dr. Rose, I want you to break down the word Wilmington. Well, how many sounds do you hear in Wilmington? So we hear a Wilmington. So there's 3 parts to that word. And then now I could say, okay, so how am I going to really attack this word? So now I'm going to start dealing with my vowels. And that's what's going to help me to break this word down. But I just feel like sometimes teachers are some of our younger or early childhood teachers, they don't realize that what you're teaching now, it's going to help them when they get to 3rd grade, when they have to break down longer words. So that's why I tell teachers, don't skip the process. It's going to help them when they get to 3rd grade, when they have to deal with big words, and they're not going to be going like this. No, they need to see words in parts.
And have those word attack skills.
Right. And then over here, start helping our kids, especially with our older grades, like we clapped out unkept. We need to start pulling out those prefixes and suffixes and say, you know what? So un means not. And we know kept means you kept something. Really tying all that in. And I feel like our early childhood teachers, it's almost like I feel like in preschool, we lay the grout down. And then in kindergarten, we start to put the building blocks. Because when you look at the Common Core standards, it starts with K to 12.
Yes.
But I feel like in preschool, we lay that grout down. We have to lay it down really smooth so that as a kindergarten teacher, I can start putting the building blocks. But I feel like I try to encourage early childhood teachers that what you do, like all these syllables and rhyming and clapping, it's going to help them when they have to attack big words. They're not going to be afraid to attack big words because they see parts in words.
Wow. Those, listen, you got the chat going crazy right now. People are really, they really like, listen, somebody want to fly you out people trying to fly you out to Ohio. Like, shout out to Ms. Stokes. Joan Stokes trying to fly you out to Ohio to teach,
that's funny.
Listen, it's a lot of love. It's a lot of love right now.
I'm going to take you with me, Dr. Ross. So listen. So one of the things that I'm trying to move it up because that thing's in the way. So after we go over this, you know how we always say, oh, you know what? We want to teach our kids more into syntax. So this is where I start saying, okay, so now we start doing who and do. So now that I have some word knowledge from my phonology, my orthographic, now I can start doing who and do. And I can start teaching noun and verb. This is as early as pre-KK. Okay, so now the dog over here, what does the dog do? He jumped. Okay, we know that doesn't sound right. So let's make a whole sentence. So now we say the opposite side. Okay, I got this. The dog, and then to really bring that whole language in, jumps.
Wow.
So now a kid can, and then it's so nice because now you can take the words and say, okay, so I want you to think of another way you can make a sentence. So, the frog swims. And then you say, okay, boys and girls, now what do we put at the end of our sentence? Hold on. Okay, hold on.
In punctuation. Yes, you get that in punctuation.
Yeah, we want children to know, and this is something that I have to tell parents and even teachers, kids need to feel like they can read already. They need to feel like, okay, you know what? All these letters and all these sounds, and now we're starting to make sentences, and it makes sense. Okay, now I'm starting to feel like a reader now. Something is really connecting. And I feel like we got to get kids to make the connections quickly so they don't feel like they're learning something in isolation.
In that confidence. That's why reading is, people go around talking about social emotional learning, talking about SEL, and I get it. But we can't forget that building that confidence is part of that SEL. Like that is, with readers, creating strong readers, you are now creating strong social and emotional learners. That's exactly what you're doing.
Right. I just saw someone in a comment. They said my 3rd grade is struggling now because they're teaching them to see the word and spell it from memory. That is now, you know what they're doing? They're missing the process. They're not seeing the parts of the word. So right now, their left side of their brain is not making any connections.
Mhm.
This right here has got to be strengthened. So now they start to create some meaning. And then they can start to see these type of words in parts. Yeah,
Yes.
we can't skip the
Yes.
process. We
So
cannot.
in that leads us to Joy, which you know what the comment just said, Sharifa just said in the comment that that's that whole language versus phonetics, you know, and versus really the science of reading, the science, because one thing, you know, I think parents, and then I'm gonna let you go. Parents, what we need to understand, and educators have to learn and understand this too, and most educators do know it, but there's brain work that has to go into reading. Reading is our brains are not wired to read. Believe it or not,
That's right.
it is decoding. It is breaking a code to read.
Yes.
You know, now our brains are wired to speak, and that's why, you know, when you talk and you have a baby, the baby's born, the baby hears you talk, the baby hears community family talk, the baby begins in most cases to talk. You know, so I think that we lose that. So kids go into kindergarten or preschool usually having an understanding and a grasp of language, you know,
Yes.
but not a grasp of reading.
Right. And that's the reason why, and if I can quote Dr. Moat, she says that we have to remember we go from speech to print. Our kids come in talking, but it's like, okay, how do we transfer that speech to print so that I can start reading? And just by showing me the word, even sight words, and I know some teachers, they're really like heavy into sight words, you know, there's also even some type of graphic to that. Let children know, you know what, the word the, it's not really how we say it, but it does have the TH. And, you know, we have to explain to children, how is this word going to work for me besides that you're just telling me to memorize it?
Yes.
You know, how is it going to work for me, you know, mapping it in my brain? You know, like I'll be honest with you, I rather teachers have sound walls than word walls, because I feel like if I'm thinking of, the word it, okay, well, I know it makes the it sound. So I'm going to look under the letter I because it makes that it sound instead of, you know, having all these words scattered. And I don't know, but that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah.
No, but that's so, all right. You were just dropping, you know, like you just dropped a lot of knowledge, a lot of actual science behind reading. Now, if I'm a parent, right? And that's what I liked. I loved about what you just showed, like all of the resources that you just showed. Those are things that if I'm a parent, I can create those at home, easy.
And you know, can I just add one more thing? Because I'm just so excited. So even something like this, you know, especially for some of our ELs, I'm always like backwards. We can even extend it and say, okay, so the dog jumps. Where does he jump? How does he jump? You know, so now even getting kids to even say, oh, okay, wait, I can extend this, you know, this 3-word sentence. Yeah. Tell me, where does he jump? How does he jump? Oh, really high? You know, like really extending that language. I'm sorry. It was on my notes here. Sorry.
No, listen, because, you know, Mr. Morris, shout out to Mr. Ken Morrison, who's a teacher at the high school in Long Branch. You know, he just put in there that, you know, this can be meaningful in ESL classrooms, which is true.
Yeah.
And then Felicia is in the Clark's in the comments saying like the sound wall. No, but you know, listen, if I'm a parent, right? I'm home.
Right.
Break it down in terms of if I have 20 minutes, right? Because I'm busy, I'm working, I'm trying to make sure everything is straight, you know, trying to make sure the kids are good. You know, I don't have a lot of time.
Gotcha.
I have 20 minutes. What is it that I should do for 20 minutes a day with my child, especially our young readers when we're thinking about K through 5, K through 4, K through 3? What should I do with it? If I only had 20 minutes.
Okay. So I almost feel like if you can, definitely review the letters and the letter sounds if you can. And really depending on where they're at. See, I kind of feel like I'm talking like pre-K, K1-ish.
Okay.
But I'll try and bring in, so I'm even thinking, see, here I go. You see that?
Yes, I see it.
So here goes a baking pan. And I would, if I'm just going over initial sounds, I'm just going to just have them. This is called rescue the object. So I'm going to say, you know, I spy something that begins with the sound. And then the kid thinks it's fun. I did it with my niece. she rips it off and she thinks she's rescuing it. So let's say if I'm working on initial sounds, this is all my phonological awareness. There's no words here. There's nothing.
Okay.
Now I'm going to move over and I'll say, okay, so now that we went over our initial sounds, now I want you to try and make a word. And then I'm just going to move my magnets. So if I say b, they'll move b. If I say d, oh, I'm sorry, I thought I had a D there. We'll just make this bep. So I will have the kids definitely create some words. Because I feel like when you think about the 4-part process, I want to make sure that they know their letter sounds and then they can start making some words. And then this is where I would start kind of going up that whole process where at least we can make a sentence. Something that's really important, I think this is something that teachers, you know, when we talk about like phonemic awareness, this is something I would do with kids, play words with children, especially if they're in the beginnings. So let's say I have the word picked. Now, how do I make the word spit?
So
okay, so
you have to put the S in. Okay.
Yeah, I put the S in. So now I want to make this word lit. So what do I do now to make it lit? So this is called phoneme deletion and phoneme substitution. Why we do this? Because it allows children to have some automaticity with words. So I'm not going to have to break down it. I know IT says it. That's it. Keep it moving.
My God.
That's it. Just keep it moving. And it just that practice. That's the reason why it's so funny. In the early childhood, I actually started something called phonological awareness drills because I'm like, our kids need that consistent practice every single day, 5 to 10 minutes. You know, run, son, thumbs up. Does it rhyme with thumbs down? Thumbs up. Good job. Kids need to hear this. They need to know the importance of it. But this is huge. Because this is one of the predictors of reading success. I think a lot of teachers, they do a lot of blending and segmenting, but now we have to get children to start seeing words in parts and moving them and moving them around. So if I have am, so how do I make it slam? Okay, so now how do I make it slap? So now I know the kid has to think, okay, slap. So that means I'm moving just the ending sound.
Yes.
That is huge. It's a very, very important skill.
Because these are the things, you know, that what you're doing a great job, Joy, of doing is breaking down what's happening in the brain when the left children are reading. Yes.
Right.
These are the things that are happening in the brain when children are reading. So these are like exercises that are only going to strengthen that left side of the brain. And what this does is, believe it or not, is it increases fluency. So now, you know, readers are not getting stuck and that's a lot of times because fluency kills comprehension.
Yes, it
does. If students just think of it as, you know, brain power, if all of your brain power is going to trying to decode words and you're not being a fluent reader, then your comprehension is definitely going to suffer.
Right. So doing exercises like that, it gets the brain to see words and parts quickly. Like I'm not breaking down it. No, it's it. I put a P is fit. I put an F is fit. I put an S is sit. Like, you know, just that automaticity. And that's where practice needs to happen every single day. And if they had an extra 10 minutes, if they did that, you know, I'm always going to go back to definitely reading a book. But something I try to encourage parents is not about just reading a book. It's about having those dialogical conversations. You know, I know sometimes we send home parents, what's the character? What's the setting? And I feel like when we go back to, here goes my thing. If we go back to that whole language comprehension where it's a unconstrained skill, I got to go deeper than the character and the setting. I have to say, you know what made him sad? Like what part in the book made him sad? You know, for me to make those connections. And I think parents need to start having conversations with the kids. Something that I do with my daughter, actually. Let's say she gets a chapter book, I'll get the same chapter book. And I'm like, okay, babe, you read chapter 1, I'm going to read chapter 1. And we'll just have conversations. And I'm like, babe, what do you think about Brian? Could you believe Brian did that? She's like, I know, he wasn't that nice. Not even realizing that her answer to me has more meat and potatoes than me just giving her a piece of paper. And she's just going to just write the answers just to finish it instead of having a conversation to build the oral language comprehension, and now her reading comprehension. It's all coming together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So those in their conversational terms, like in sometimes where as parents, we get so busy, we get so bogged down that we stop engaging in conversations with our children. And the questions stop. Or the questions are like you said, how was your day? How was school today? And it's a one-word answer,
Oh, I have
and it's
something
like,
to say.
oh,
Yeah,
it was a good day,
right,
but we have to get better and more skilled at having. Think about it when you were dating, you were trying to have some deep conversations. I know with the sisters, we try to have deep conversations because we try to find out more, and
right,
that's how you have to talk to your children, like you
right. Yeah.
have to invest in those conversations, and if it's
Right.
in
And you
around
know
a
what's so
book
funny?
is critical.
So something I even do with my daughter, I try to I call her like the word collector. So sometimes she'll use like a word. I'm like, yo,
Mhm.
I like how you use that word. So she's all like, oh, okay. And I think, we have to kind of celebrate those moments. So I call it like
Yes.
the word collector. Let children be a word collector. Celebrate when they use like a really funky language. It's just like, wow, I love your sentence structure. I like how you did
Yes.
that. But something I just want to show you, and something that if parents don't have a lot of time, poetry is amazing. So this
Mm.
is actually something I do with my daughter. It's from Langston Hughes.
Okay.
So could you see that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so this was a very quick poem. The poem, I forgot the name of the poem, but this was a part of the poem. Sweet and docile, meek, humble, and kind. Beware the day they change their minds.
Mm.
Just from this small poem, I was able to, number one, we talked about synonyms. I said, what
Mhm.
does docile mean? What does
Mm.
that even mean?
Mhm.
And my daughter was like, I don't know. I said, well, this is a good time to look it up. But I said, but I
Yes.
want you to see, number one, the flow of the words. And then we got a chance to even talk about how the letter C, when there's an I after it, it makes the
Mhm.
S sound.
Mhm.
So even just with this little poem, I'm able to go over rhyming words. I'm able to go over vocabulary, synonyms. And then I put a little history in there. I said,
Mm.
how is this little poem related to our world today? We talk about like the Black
Mhm.
Lives Matter. And
Yes.
she said, it's because back in the day, it was so submissive and now they're upset. And
Wow.
mind you, this was just a little poem. I didn't even have to. So I
Yes.
feel like if parents get a poem, get something deep where it's just like, did you
Yes.
hear the rhyming words? Did
Yes.
you notice how they did this? And what a great conversation to add in with a poem. And now I put a little social studies and it's realistic. And
Yes.
now she'll never forget what docile means. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, it means someone that's submissive. And I said, it's almost like being sweet. Sometimes we a little too laid back. And now it says
Yes.
beware. That means that the
Yes.
poem got turned up. Beware when we change our minds. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? So
Yes.
even just having that conversation with her, I was able to talk about the whole Black Lives Matter without
Mm.
turning on the news, but
Actually,
really
yes.
giving her a little bit of background and then bringing it back forward. So
Wow.
parents, you can poetry is amazing. It's so
Yeah.
much language, and I feel like our kids really miss out on being playful with their language. That's what most of these children's books are. It's just a bunch of people playing with language, but I
Mhm.
feel like children need permission to know they can do that.
Yes. And
You
it's
know?
celebrated, like you said. And one of the things that also builds on Joy is that content knowledge, because now you created with that Langston Hughes poem. Now you
Yes,
created when Simone's discussing something in the classroom, now she has a reference that she
yes,
can pull and say,
yep,
oh, that's like the Langston Hughes poem.
that's right. Yep,
And now, you could pull it into your speech, you can pull it into your writing. So
yes,
it's like and that's something that we have to hold on to and build, is that content knowledge. So I love how you
yes,
did that. I
yes.
love how you did that.
And I feel like teachers, and one thing, if I can say, when we build content knowledge I think sometimes we get caught up in like the cutesy books, which is great. Books,
Mhm.
fiction is great, but I feel like we have to make sure that our kids are exposed to nonfiction text because that's going to help me understand my fiction text. The
Yeah.
expository text, like, it's almost like if I want to know about the supermarket and I have like an expository text and it's like real pictures, the produce section, the vegetable section. So now when you read me like llama llama, he's in the supermarket, I already have enough background knowledge where I
Yeah,
can kind of decipher between fake and real. We
Mm.
got to expose our kids to the nonfiction text is going to awaken the fiction text.
Oh my God. Listen,
I'm sued.
listen, you are dropping. I'm learning so much. I'm sure the listeners, I can tell by the chat, folks are going crazy. You need to listen, you need to do weekly sessions, Joy. Like really. If there was a book, or a resource,
Okay.
that you would suggest for parents, for educators, to kind of stay abreast of a lot of the science that you're speaking of? What would you recommend?
Oh boy. That's a little tough because I feel like with parents, I don't want them to get caught up in like the terminology. Like I feel like I was going to say speech to print by Dr. Moats, but some of the verbiage, I'm like, let me read that, reread that again. So, I would just say, I'm just really trying to think of a really good resource. I'm thinking of all educational books that you and I would read,
Yes.
So
and that's why it's important to have, educators such as yourself
around you. Yes. Yep. I agree.
That's, because you're taking some complex science and some technical, this is literally brain science. All right. But you're making in an artful way, you are breaking down, what it looks like in practice, and that's the magic of teaching, and those teachers out there, stay on your game. Keep learning. Don't stop. A lot of teachers, they leave the university and the last thing they learn about teaching reading or teaching period is what they learned in college.
I'm going to tell you something, Dr. Rawls. I have witnessed that when we have like young girls, when they come for interviews and I'm like, oh boy, just simple questions like, so tell me, what would you do with the child that's struggling with fluency, and you know what? And it's actually, to be honest with you, it might be one of my topics for my dissertation, just with, the lack of preparation in reading with a lot of our universities. Like, I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to name any universities, but I happen to actually compare some of the classes. You're not really prepared. And especially if you're an elementary major, it's too broad. Where I feel like when your early childhood is a little more specialized. I had some very tough professors. I'll never forget, God, rest in peace, Dr. Lenhoff. He called her Corella DeVille, but she was no joke. She was like, I don't want you to go out into this world or go onto the teaching field and follow a program. That she was huge on that. She said, I want you to be so prepared that if somebody rips a program from you, you got the skills to pay the bills and you will come and bring your game. So I felt like that was my core of teaching, to not rely on a program. I know we have to have a program for accountability and some type of consistency and for subs, but as far as the practice, like I'm thinking of like shared reading, read alouds, it's like those are practices for reading, period. It's just a reading structure. But if a book doesn't tell me to do it, it doesn't mean I shouldn't be doing it. And that's something I see with a lot of teachers, is that they're like, well, the book didn't say that, and I'm scared about that. I'm like, well, guess what? We need to really fill the educational backpack, because you're missing out. And there's no perfect program. So you have to say, what is it that I come with? But unfortunately, a lot of our universities, if you look at the major descriptions, they don't prepare the teachers. And then they come in and it's just like, they're just winging it. And I do feel bad. I really do. That's the reason why I'm hoping after I get my doctorate, I'm going to be in the early childhood department. So I could change some educational backpacks. I'm going to fill their backpacks.
You could, there, and in this country, there's the whole history, the reading wars.
Yes.
In a lot of, educational programs, they go back to whole language, and a lot of them are still holding on to it. And they're more into teaching methods as opposed to the science of teaching, let's say, reading in this case. So it's a very, not to get, to go off too much on a tangent, but it's like we geeking out right here over, the science of reading. But that's a real phenomenon that is really happening. And like you said, there's some universities that do it well. They have a great program. But then there's others where, we're doing a disservice to the student, and then the students who they are going to eventually serve. Like we're doing a massive disservice.
And you know what I noticed is that a lot of our, unfortunately, if you look at a lot of our college courses, but if you look at, let's say, our pre-K to, let's say, 5th grade-ish, they are very, they do well with pedagogy. So I know how to engage the kids, sing, developmental practices. But then when you go to like middle school, high school, you notice that they're tight with their content. but maybe their
Yes.
pedagogy is not so great.
Yes.
So it's like, you know what,
Yeah.
how do we connect those two pieces in early
Yes.
childhood, where it's like your pedagogy is great to sing,
Mhm.
have your visuals, but I need this to sharpen up. I need your content to be tight so that,
Yes.
you know the practices that our kids need. So
Yeah.
I feel like I feel like when you look at some of the college courses, a lot of pedagogy, but it's not too much content going on.
Content is not that building that knowledge, and
Yeah.
because then when you have the content in the pedagogy, it's like, the
Oh, it's
RZA
dope.
said, it's putting bananas in your cereal. It's like
Right.
you're baking in that knowledge into that method.
Yes.
Man, you'll have kids like, listen,
Right.
children, listen,
Yeah,
it'll be crazy in your classroom.
Yeah, it's like your classroom will be the science of reading. And don't let me even
Yes.
get into math, which I'm actually starting to get into. But even just with the math, just like how so many people, even my age, I really wasn't a math person, but I'm just thinking, gosh, if the teacher would have made me feel like a mathematician, maybe I would have felt like I can do some math. It's like,
Yes.
it's almost goes back to like when I talked about my prepositions. It's like we have to provide opportunities for children to know how you interpret the information is unique, and it's okay. And it's not a one size fits all. So you have to bring your game. And I always tell teachers, be very careful. Don't try and teach children how you were always taught, because you have other learners in here and it's not fair to them. So teaching is about, you got to get out your comfort zone. And if you can't put on a show and put on a different hat, it's going to get difficult and you're going to miss the opportunities for the information to stick for children.
Yes. Joy.
Yeah.
We definitely have to have a part 2.
Well, you know what? You're going to kill me. I have 2 books here, and I promise I'm done.
Go ahead. No,
Okay.
Show us.
Okay. So just one more thing. So something that I did for my passion project, and I did the whole thing with like multicultural literacy. So I know SEL, it's a very big word, which is huge. It's different to different people. I kind of saw it as, social emotional learning plus multicultural education equals equity. I feel like, with our young children, because they're so impressionable, that literacy just opens up topics and things that we might not be able to talk about.
Yes.
So I just caution, I always try to encourage teachers, when you read a book, what's your purpose in reading that book? Where do you want to go with this? What's the perspective? It's not about just reading cutesy, picture books. So I just want to just quickly just show you. And I just, I feel like when I read books, I look at it differently. So this is from Jabari Jumps. Okay, let me go this way. And there's a part here, there's a line here. It says, he's about to go into the pool and he's really scared. He says, but when his dad squeezed his hand, Jabari squeezed back. Just that one sentence alone, it tells me that there's a sense of vulnerability between a father and a son.
Yes.
Which sometimes, look at our world today, people think that, men don't have, no, they do.
Yes.
And I love how this author just portrayed, there's a sense of vulnerability between 2 men. And it also, I'm going to go deeper, 2 African-American men. So I feel like, when teachers read books, I want them to read it with more intention and just say, boys and girls, even boys are scared. We're all scared. And I love the depiction how the fathers are taking the kids to pool. And then I have one more. This is I don't know if Hair Love. Have you seen this book?
Yes, I have seen that one. I have seen that one. Yes.
Yeah. So I feel like, it's so important for our kids, and I love this. Oh, here. I think it's just so important for our kids to see. I forgot her name. Doctor, and it'll come to me, but she always talks about like mirrors and windows and sliding doors. And at an early age, our kids need to see themselves in books. And I love how this book, it portrays like this father who has locks, not dreads, because someone corrected me on that and using the right terminology, but even how this modern father is like trying to do his daughter's hair. And we know the perception out there. Do fathers even have connection with their daughters? Absolutely, they do. And if a child doesn't think it can happen, well, in books, we can show them it can happen. So I just want teachers to, when they take these picture books and not just read it because it's just cute. No, it goes deeper. Like we have to fill their social emotional and that whole equity piece. It lets me know that there's some inclusivity, and it lets me know, you know what? I see you. I hear you. I might not understand what you're going through, but I'm going to take the time to learn. I'm going to take the time to show your friends. And I want teachers to really take reading books beyond just, who's the character and what's the setting? No, how did you relate to this book? Did
Go
any of
deeper.
you learn something about the characters? We got to go deep.
Yes.
And I just feel like picture books, especially for our young learners, it just opens up conversations that parents can have with kids that are easy to have with kids. So I just have to represent, got to go deep.
Listen, and it, you know what? Thank you for sharing those gems. And it also, it takes, because right now equity is the buzzword in education, right?
Right.
And it's kind of like, it's getting to the point where it's getting dangerous because it's becoming almost like a check the box type of thing.
Yes. Right.
But
Right.
I like the approach that you explain, where it's okay, we have these texts, that are culturally responsive, that are responsive to the diversity, in our world. But it's not good enough just to say we have them.
Yes.
We have to take it to another level,
Right.
with,
Absolutely.
yes,
Absolutely.
which
And
is,
I
is
just,
essential.
yeah, I just think we need to let our kids know that we see them. I
Yes,
hear you. I feel
yes.
you. And I don't need to know. I might not go through everything you went through, but I'm going to take the time to learn. So I'm going to read this book to you. And I think children, our young ones, they're not exposed to so much. So through these books, a teacher is going to say, you know what? You might not have been, you might not have lived in the city, but let me show you what it is. Your perception is so one-minded,
Yes,
depending on your parents and where you've
yes.
been. Fathers, yeah, they do their daughter's hair. You just maybe not have met one, but they're out there.
It's happening.
It's out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we
This
the
was so
comments,
dope. I loved it.
the comments are coming in. Mr. Morrison had a great comment, and it kind of like makes me think, because he was like kind of questioning, this whole, like, how do we account for this shift, the focus from pedagogy to content.
Mhm.
And is it the assumption that middle school and secondary kids, come prepared in terms of, skills? And I go ahead. What do you?
I wouldn't say that. It's just that, even when you look at the middle school and secondary, like let's say if you went to you teach in middle school, most of the time you took math courses. So it's very, very specific. Where in the early childhood is more about how do we make sure we have developmental practices. The content is very different. Yours is very specific. It
and
is
targeted to yes,
it's very targeted. So yeah. And I just think I've heard high school, the teachers, like they have a hard time. Like, how do I engage the kids without losing them? Where I think in early childhood, we know that so well. We know how to get the kids out. We know how to sing. We know how to sing in transition. But I feel like when it comes to like, when we talk about like the whole science of reading and early math, it's some areas that we have to strengthen.
Yes. So shout out to Felicia, just put that you challenged her to step out of her comfort zone.
I did.
In that, listen, giving the permission, because sometimes we step in spaces, and let's keep it real, especially Black educators, there aren't many of us in these spaces. When you look at statistically who makes up the teaching force, it's 84% of white women. So when we have, when we step into these spaces, sometimes we don't feel comfortable to be our authentic self,
And that's where I come in. I'm like, I'll help you out.
And that's why we need, more, joy. The children, community is very fortunate to have you. You are definitely a jewel. And, you're definitely someone who, I always have, how I'm always calling you, picking your brain, asking you, sending you texts. What do you think about this? What do you think about that?
Yeah.
And building community. And that's why, I was like, I got to get Joy on the show because, we need to understand what kind of educators. We got some powerful, heavy hitters out here. And
we do. Absolutely.
You are definitely, one of my favorite. And one of my go-to, and I have a lot of respect, for what you do and how you do it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
No, thank you. You definitely blessed the show. And, like I said, we're definitely going to get you back on. I'm working on, I'm thinking of getting a few educators on at once, and doing some talks. Because even with like what Mr. Morrison was talking about, like imagine starting to have some dialogue, You know, you talk about vertical articulation. That's why vertical articulation is important, because then we can kind of hear these perspectives, and we're not teaching in this isolated silo, you know, of all the elementary. And no, we're educators, you know, and we need to talk about our purpose and our practice and what we do. So, you know, I like to, you know, give at the end, you know, to give you a chance to, if there's any closing or anything that you feel like you want to get, you know, off your mind, you know, feel free to do it.
I think I you know, as long as I got through everything on my table.
That's the teacher in you. See that?
I'm like, right? Did I get everything on my table? You know what? So let me see. You know, I think I just have just my closing remarks. Like I said, just really encouraging the poetry, especially when you brought up, you know, suppose you only have 20 minutes. And I'm just like, poetry, man, it really opens up so many different elements of reading that I just don't think that we can comprehend it, but we miss those moments. But poetry is awesome. Having the dialogic conversation with the kids, you know, have real conversations. I almost call it like a coffee shop talk. Like, you know what? So what do you think about that character? Are you feeling him? You're not feeling him? Then it makes kids feel like, okay, we're just having a instead of like, what's the summary and who's the character and you know, what's the problem and solution? Whoa,
make an inference, or you know, like it's like all of that. Right.
And it's like you don't realize kids will easily, if you have that very natural conversation, they're going to make inferences by saying, you know what? I knew that John was mad because you know his face was really red. They're going to naturally do it without feeling like it's like a checklist. I was going to say, hype your kids up. You know, your energy is contagious. Like I said, you know, like I always tell my niece, like when she reads the book, like she gets so happy when I say, oh, you are cooking, you are hot. And her face is like, wow. She doesn't really understand the whole alphabetical code, but the fact that she's moving her fingers from left to right and she's reading that book, she's like, I'm a reader. And when I break the alphabetical code, it's on. Like I'm definitely going to blow.
It's going to be.
The doors are going to open. But, so I always tell, you know, parent, you know, make sure, especially our older grades, encourage being a word collector. I feel like children need to know there's so many different ways to express your vocabulary and use different. I love when I find a new word. I'm like, oh, how am I going to use it in my email? Oh, okay. You know, we just want children to know that you sound so funky and elegant when you use other words. You know, and then last, I have two more things. Making books mentors, teachers, use books as your mentors. Use it to mentor you and to the children. And then last but not least, what's your belief system? What do you believe that children can do? Because if you think that you're just going to, you know, save them, oh, they might, then that's how you're going to teach. So check your heart, check your ego, and check your belief system.
Love it. Very well. You definitely dropped the mic. Joy was definitely in the building. Hopefully, you know, everybody got a lot out of this. You know, you talking about adding on. You just, you know, it's just so much I took away. So much more I want to learn from you, and I'm going to continue to learn from you. I'm very, very fortunate to have you in my village, you know, and to have you as someone that I can count on and call a sister. So I appreciate and love you for that. And those of you who out there,
thanks, brother. I appreciate you.
Yes, no doubt. Those of you who tuned in, thank you for tuning in. You definitely got blessed today. And Joy, you can definitely find Joy Daniels on Facebook. And you can hear more, you know, about some of these strategies. And I'm sure she's definitely open to you, you know, contacting her for any type of advice that you might have, especially if you have those young readers out there that we want to get, you know, to the level that they need to get to. So definitely a shout out to the community, Purpose and Practice. We are going to sign off episode 11. Now, remember, we got another educator tomorrow we will be joined tomorrow by Brother Michael Bland, who is into ed reform. And we're going to talk, you know, and that's going to give us another perspective, you know, of this educational world that we're in, and, you know, the dynamics of education. So with that said, peace out, stay safe, and we'll see y'all in another 23 hours. So it's peace, 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 peace. Thank you again, Miss Joy.
It's a 9-chord banger. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to Purpose and Practice. Ayy. yeah, purpose and practice. Keep your mental sharp, learn all the tactics. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to purpose and practice. Ayy, yeah, purpose and practice. Podcast game, ayy, he got it mastered. Sign call.